Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the Zoho Orchestly webinar. Zoho Orchestly is a new application that we have come up with. It's a business orchestration platform. I'm Avinash. I'll be the host for this session. I hope everyone is having a great day. So let's just get started with the session right away. So what we mean by business orchestration platform is that if you take anything around us, you can simplify every single task or any process around us into stages and processes that can be defined. For example, here is an example of a simple game. So this chart here clearly defines how the Pictionary game works out in terms of simple stages and what is the process to play the game is available just by looking at this chart. Now this can even be a complex process. Here we have an example of a career. So if we take our personal life, we have a number of examples like Uber, Amazon, Fitbit, GrabHub, which track and helps out with certain aspects of our lives. Uber, for example, you can check out the availability of cabs in that particular area, and you can book a cab. You can check out the time that is estimated for you to receive the cab, and then your payment, and when you're en route to your destination. All of that information is available to you and can be tracked step by step. Same goes for Amazon regarding your online orders, and Fitbit regarding your health. Now, if you take a similar case for our work situation, we have soft phones and Avaya systems for our calls. We have a mail client, Zoho Mail or Gmail for our mails. Zoho Desk might be taking care of your support functions. CRM might be used by our sales team for your sales processes. But where does all of this come together? Business as such, can you have a single view where you can track all of these end to end? Your various support functions, marketing functions, your operations, and your sales, pre-sales, and post-sales functions. All of that, can all of this be simply drawn out into a single chart on a process, and can you track all those any changes that you are doing, and what are the various steps that is currently being performed, and all that information, is it available in a single self-contained unit? Well, that is what we are trying to solve here. Currently, even though you might be using various apps which are completely capable of handling individual processes like CRM for your customer relations and support for your desk functions, does it actually show and reflect the entire business process? That is what we are trying to solve. What has to be done next? Who has to do it? How is the process going to be taken forward? And why should it be handed over to another team or to such and such stage? All of this information, as it stands, cannot be put under a single space and cannot be handled under a single space. So this is the challenge that we're going to solve using Zoho Orchestly. So we call it an orchestration platform because you can very simply, making use of simple click and drag functions, set up your entire business process, automate your business workflows, and apply it across your business. It does not matter if you have a company that is only 2 or 3 people, a small startup, or a mid-sized company with tens or hundreds of users, or even large enterprises with thousands of users. It does not matter. You can apply the same principles, the same workflows, and scale it, and have that entire business process under one roof. So Orchestly is not going to be something that is specific to a particular industry. It's not specific to only IT, or is not only specific to HR or finance. It can be used in any type of sectors. Here are a few examples that we have listed. Any construction company, any manufacturing company, any legal company, anyone can apply Orchestly to make their lives much simpler. Before we take a look at the actual product, let's get familiar with a few of the terminologies that we're going to use. Job. So what is a job? So when you raise a request, all of the information that is required to process that particular request is going to be captured and logged as a job. So that information, based on whatever fields that you've created, that particular information is going to be processed through the process that you have set up. So the process that is going to be set up by you, that's going to be the blueprint. So this is not going to be a painstaking, way of creating process. We've simplified as much as we can to make your life very easy. You can simply click and drag, just draw lines between various boxes. It's as simple as that. You can create a working software module out of that. So that is the blueprint, the process that you define using click and drag. Stages and transitions are what makes up a blueprint. Stages are the various states or the various stages. So your job, once it's logged, it's going to pass through one stage after the other until we reach the end state or our destination when the job gets done or the request has been closed. Transitions are how your job moves from one stage to another. What happens when that happens, when that particular job moves from one stage to another? Who has to make that happen, and what happens during that particular move? Certain information have to be captured, or an email has to be triggered, or an SMS has to be triggered, or information ought to be pushed over to another third-party application or to your CRM. All of that actions and validations is what you can define on the transition. Services is essentially the underlying form or the layout of data that you can set up. So it will be the various fields that are required to process the job. So that will be defined under services, and you can also select an icon while creating your service, which will indicate the app sort of front end where you can click on and request for that service. Now simply, this is the diagram that's going to give you how this entire thing works. So you set up a service with the layout of forms and the fields which are required to submit a job. Someone can raise that job based on the access that you provide and request for that service. So now that information is logged and available as a job in the system, and it will be automatically made available for the responsible parties in your company. So from stage 1 to stage 2, what are the transition processes and validations required? That will be automatically assigned to that particular person to make that transition happen, and he or she or that particular team will move the job from one stage to another, all the while triggering all of the notifications as well as any update of data, and any other process that has to be handled will happen as per the process that you have defined. So initially this goes on to stage 3, stage 4, until whatever stage that you have defined as the end state. So that is pretty much how this works. Now let's take a look at the actual application. So before we can go under the hood and explain how simple it is to create these processes, I have a number of processes that I have created, and I would like to show you the end user experience a bit before we dive in. So let's say I am going to request for a resource in my team, right? So I am going to click on hiring here. So this form that you see is now available so that you can log in the details of this particular job. So I'm going to request for a writer for my catalog team. All right. So I'm going to leave all of the other details as such. It's entirely up to you. You can make certain fields mandatory, or you can completely remove some of these items from here. And whatever fields that I've defined and the data that's going to be updated, all of that is going to be available on this screen. This will also include the audit logs of who has made such changes and what are the information that's updated to the field in question, and all such details of this particular job will be available on this details page. And the blue bar that you see on top, that's where you're gonna get the various buttons to make the transition from one stage to another. Now, according to this hiring process, what I've done is essentially define the first state to be request has been raised for the resource, and I can move to the next stages in this hiring process based on who can handle this. So the first stage I've designed so that only those who are assigned to this particular job may do it. So I have assigned it to myself on this particular login. Now, as you see, I get this option to move along. But before that, let's assume that I'm someone else, right? I'm just logging in, whoever is going to be processing this. I'm logging in and I'm on my jobs page. Whatever approvals and transitions I have to perform is available on my dashboard here. So I see this request for writer catalog. I go in, I get this option to send resume. So I have a candidate in question. So I am simply gonna attach this PDF. Let's assume this is the resume that I'm uploading, and I have moved it along. Now, this particular transition has happened, and as you see, we have now attached the resume. So you can define what field has to pop up, just like how we have the attachment field pop up during that transition. You can make it so that maybe you want to choose the interview date. That's also possible, as we'll see down the line. You can pretty much define any type of field, whether it has to be a link or a email field or an integer field or a simple text field. All of that is possible. And post you upload such information, what has to happen, whether you want this information to be emailed to someone, even that is possible. So now I moved along this particular transition. I have sent the resume to be analyzed. What I'm going to do is I have another login here, and this login has HR access. So as the HR, now I have the access to either to approve or to reject this particular candidate. So I am approving. So I have, for this particular transition, not chosen any data to be collected. So you get a simple question of whether you have to perform this transition or not as a confirmation. I move that along. So once the candidate has been approved for interview, the first step is to send out the call letter and schedule the interview. So I'm gonna schedule the interview by clicking on select date. As you get this particular field, this is a date field where you can select the interview date. So I am gonna make this happen on 28th. I've saved it there. So it has been moved over to the department interview. Now, this particular option is going to be taken care by the manager of that particular department. So now I'm logged in as the manager of that department, and I get the option to select the candidate or not. So this candidate, while selecting, you can make edits to whatever action has to happen. For example, let's go back to the initial login. Let's say I want to make changes to that particular transition. So you get the idea as to how to approve and move along the entire process. Now, how to edit it. Now, if I need to create the initial form or to edit the initial form where you can define the various fields available, all you need to do is to go to the settings page and under services, go to that particular service, click on edit service, and you can edit the basic information like the icon that you want for this particular service, so that the end user, while clicking on the request, what is the icon that you feel more relevant to your particular service that you have defined, and what are the prefix IDs for that particular service, and who can request for the service. So that initial page where we requested for this, you can make sure that only specific apps or specific services are going to be available for certain users. So this particular hiring process, perhaps you want only people with certain role or people in a certain team. So let's say you only want the managers to request for it. So no longer with anyone with ordinary employee access will be able to do it. Only manager role users will be able to request for resources. So that type of customization is possible. And to edit the actual fields within that particular service, you can just click on the service, go into it, and you can edit any of the fields or remove them. So if you want to edit the properties, change the name, whether to make this as mandatory or not, or to make it visible on the details page, or just during the transition, all of that is possible. If you want to add a new section, you just click on the add section button here. You can rename this section to whatever you want. If you want to add any type of field, you can just quickly add it here. So since this is a critical or a sensitive information, I'm going to encrypt this, and I'm going to flag this as personally identifiable information. And I have saved it. So now not only have we easily created the field that we want for the service, we've also made it GDPR compliant, and you can quickly save it and it will reflect on the process. Now, as for the process itself, you have to go to the blueprint. You can add a fresh process if you want to define a new one, and select the underlying service or the underlying form. Or in this case, I already have one. Going over to this place where the entire process has been made available. So now this, I want to edit this particular option. So this has to be available for manager role users, as well as rejection is going to be available for manager role users. Now notice how we have the validation available for not only individual users as well as people with specific roles and the teams to which they belong. So you can make certain processes only available to certain teams, and you can make certain processes only available to certain users specifically or to people with that sufficient role. So what it does is this enables your process to be dynamic regardless of your workflows being changed every few months or even years. You no longer have to go back and make the changes and specify the users themselves whenever your workforce changes. Automatically, whenever you change your workflows, people, if they're added with the right role to your user database, they're going to be pretty much able to do whatever work that they ought to do by default because the process has been defined as such. So that is why we have provided the option for you to define these validations in terms of not only specific users but also teams and roles. So I've made this available to manager role users, and when the user is going to be selected, what I want is not for the date. I am actually going to add a field. Let's say a reason for selecting this candidate. I haven't made such a field in the earlier service form, but I can quickly make this here. And it's going to be a text field. There. Now that information has been set up, and I'm done with editing this one. So let's say for this earlier piece where we selected the date to send out the call letter, let's say I want one of these actions to happen. So I want to notify the team manager as well as the candidate should receive a call letter. I can make use of this function, send email. So I've already created a template for call letter. I can select that. Or if you want to create a fresh one, you can create a new template right from here. We support a lot of placeholders, including any custom field that you might have added. All of that is going to be available as placeholders, which you can quickly set up. So you can, set this template with whatever information. If you have a custom field for the user's name, or let's say this is the requester in this case, I'm just gonna make this available so that whoever is gonna be handling this, or whoever is the intended recipients, all that is gonna be automatically available as placeholders. You need not type this out. So you can save this template and have it available. You can specify specific users or specific teams on CC and BCC and stuff like that. And we have a number of other options like updating fields based on these transitions within the particular job or particular process. You can configure webhooks so that you can update to other applications. You can set up integrations with the other apps. We have custom functions available. So any app that supports APIs, you can pretty much integrate multiple apps to push and pull data from Orchestly. So these are the three important things while defining the transition. So the white boxes that you see here are the stages, the various stages that you've defined. The darker portion that you see, the darker boxes, those are the transitions where you will define these three items: before, during, and after. So before is where you define who has to do or perform these particular transitions, and you can additionally add criteria. We have Boolean patterns available where you can select certain fields to be acting as criteria when this particular transition is to be made available. And the during, as we've seen, you can select what information is to be collected. So here I want the interview date to be collected. And in the after, you can specify whether emails ought to go out or integration has to take place, where you can push and pull data, or you can just update like a notification to other apps. So all that information can be configured here. So it's simple as that to set up this process. So let's say I want to add another stage or make any amends to this particular process. So let's say this is a straightforward process, as you see, just a single interview from the department and then an HR interview. Let's say we want another interview round. So I just draw and department interview round 2. So with ease, I've now created another round of interview from the department. So let's say this is only going to be available if the candidate is put on hold from the first interview, right? So if the user now gets to round 2 interview, if they are on hold, what happens is we need an option to select. Since I've already defined a selected button from round 1, I can now make the same available from the round 2 as well. All I need to do is to enable the common transition, in which case you can make this available from multiple. So it's going to be available from department interview 1 and department interview 2. So this transition or this button is going to be available from both these rounds. The same goes for rejected. We need a rejection option from that particular stage as well. So I'm going to go over to the rejected button, clicking on that and selecting the latest stage that we've added. So just like that, with like 4 or 5 clicks, as you've seen, we've modified the process, added another round of interview, and I'm publishing it. All that's need to be done. So here I'm going to define as this being available for manager. Manager. So that is my criteria now, and I have published it. So now that we have published the process, we can quickly go over to the job that we are already in the midst of processing. As we've seen earlier, we only had the option to either select or reject the candidate. Now you see we have this additional option to hold, in which case we now have moved on to the round 2. So as you see, with such simplicity, we have made edits to the process. So the same, while creating the process, we just drag and drop. So with such ease, we are able to build out the entire process, have it integrated with other applications, and all of that can be done on a much larger scale. I've taken this hiring to make this demo much easier to comprehend. You can make this scale into anything. You can completely set up your business end to end, build out a large process, or you can break down into smaller processes, which can also be called, you can call one blueprint and have that call another blueprint if needs be. Right? So let's look at additional information. So as we've seen right now, within the blueprint, we have the option to define teams and roles, and that helps us make this entire thing very dynamic. No requirement whatsoever for you to go back and change the process to specify who has to handle it. So here you can define your teams. You can add a new team, as simple as that. Name the team, select the users who ought to be on this particular team, select the email addresses or add the email address for this particular team so that you can use it for notification and whatnot. You can assign any number of roles for the users. It's not just each user has to be of a specific role alone. If your process requires it, or if you follow a cross role sort of situation within your company, feel free to add new roles and set them up that way. You can add a new user by simply adding the email address of the user. You can select the profile. Profile is nothing but the in-depth access level that you'd like to provide, which we'll see just a bit. You can define every single access for every single field even, and select the team and role and who's the reporting manager and all such information from this user section. If you are using AD in your company, you can simply integrate your Active Directory using the Zo Directory integration here. So under access control, you can define the roles. You can add the roles, the name of the role, and users who ought to be of that role. So this will usually just be defined here as tags on the user, but where this actually takes form is within the blueprint, where you will define which role or which team has to perform those actions. But profiles are much more important on a very global scale within blueprint or within the Orchestly application. So here you can add new profile and you can define various access levels that they get in depth, turn on or turn off any of them. And we also provide field level permissions for every single field, whether it be default or the custom fields that you create. You can enable or disable access. You can hide the field completely or make it a read-only field, or read and write capabilities can be provided. This applies to any role that you create. You can make these changes. You can create numerous roles and you can edit them in whatever possible form that you want. So that is pretty much how the user section works out. So we have an additional section here. We've already seen how the email templates work. Nothing much to explain for this particular demo. And business rules and webhooks are quite standard. You can automate certain portion of your process using the business rules, and webhooks are used to push notifications to third-party applications. Apart from this, we have a lot of reporting capabilities which are inbuilt. So here we see the default report, one of them being unique to Orchestly, which is the blueprint usage report. This is available in two forms: the stage and transition usage report. We are currently on the transition report, where you will see the numbers right over each transition. Now this defines how many times this particular transition has been used. What this helps you in identifying is the bottlenecks. For example, if there are any loops in any manufacturing process or any quality checks, You might have loops where changes are required and then you loop back to an initial stage and then you have the process continue. If there are certain loops where the number of times a job has passed through that transition is more, you can identify that the job's rejection rate or the changes required is much more. So without much effort at all, just by looking at the high number on a particular loop or a particular section of the process, you can identify that's where your bottlenecks are requiring your attention. You can directly go into whatever details are required on that particular section and iron out the details for yourselves. Next, we have the stage usage report. Here you will have the numbers written over the stages. What this means is these are the number of jobs that are in this particular stage. So how many requests lie in which stage can be quickly identified. Apart from this, we have a number of standard reports like the job distribution chart and the stage utilization chart. You can create your own reports in any manner. Now, this is a stage duration chart, which is extremely useful to identify how much time is being spent on any particular stage. Now you can create your report pretty much based on any logic, as we support all custom fields, whatever you have created to be made available. So here you will first have to select what is the underlying process, and you can create a new folder to group these reports that you're creating, or select one of the existing folders. You can select what you need to report for. Now the report for and plot for are essentially your X and Y axis. So you can make this the total number of jobs, or you can make this a sum of all of your various fields that you've created, if you've used a number of integer fields and so on. You can create any average report or like a min-max sort of report that you require. So this is going to be essentially available for anything, even your custom fields that you have created. All of that is going to be available. So feel free, for any complex process you can define anything as your x-axis and pretty much anything as your y-axis, and you can go like that. You can also group the data that you get in terms of owners or stages or in terms of teams. So a lot of flexibility has been provided, and you can even additionally go ahead and create a Boolean formula defining the criteria. So it's not a simple criteria that you can look for. You can even apply complex logics to filter out specific set of data. So reporting wise, whatever combinations that you require, without the need for any external analytics tool, you can go right ahead and create your report, however complex they are, any zonal reports or delivery reports, anything that you like. Any logic can be applied, and you can create custom reports of your own. So that is pretty much how things work. I hope it was a very useful session for you all. And if you have any doubts, please feel free to write to us at support@orchestly.com. That's support@orchestly.com. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great day ahead.